The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome in, everybody. It is time for another edition of Need to Know. Kip Keefer with you. And like always, I'm delighted to have you on board here on TKR and across all of the podcast platforms. We have a variety of subjects that we talk about. Last week, if you missed the show, I kind of reviewed the history and the current operation of the FBI, because it's a fascinating subject to me to see how that particular institution has evolved and what it's become. And tried to make the point last week that it really isn't a big surprise that it has gone political, like so many other the agencies and bureaus and departments in Washington, because a central theme of this program each week is to try and get you into the mindset of a conclusion I've made that I'm absolutely steadfast in my accuracy, that what we're currently witnessing in America is not a red versus blue, conservative versus liberal, Republican versus Democrat situation. This is the massive organism of federal government against the people of the United States who are trying to live in what this country was founded on, which is a representative republic. They hate everything about the Constitution, the founding of this country. They are in close cahoots with people that want America and its resources and its wealth and its military might to be global contributors, not a standalone powerhouse country that stands up for human rights and for all of the liberties and personal freedoms that we are so privileged to enjoy in this country. They don't think you're qualified or I'm qualified to be able to make decisions for myself. We need to be sheeps, and the flock leaders are the elites in Washington, these Ivy League know-it-all educators who are woke and, focused on supposedly all of these diversity, equity, inclusion platforms that basically mean that they want us all herded into the same pen. They actually, at the end of the day, don't care about any of that stuff. But by creating this identity politics and pitting me and you against another group or another individual, that's the quickest way to achieve their goal of being the absolute rulers of you, your destiny, where you want to go, what you want to do, what you can spend your money on. If you have any money, they want to take away the opportunity to even carry around actual assets in terms of currency and make everything digital. So if you step out of line, they can step in. And this is the dream of these people that want to steal your life in this and the way that our country was founded. They want to just be able to reach into your assets and pull out whatever they think you owe in terms of taxation or punitive action for your opinions. If you control the monetary system, you control the healthcare system, you are completely in charge of all of what people can have and can't have. You hear all these people decrying everything from electric or gas stoves to gas grills to gas leaf blowers. I heard one commentator, and it was like, is this a Saturday Night Live skit? Taylor Swift, of course, flew back from Tokyo after a Saturday night concert to arrive in Las Vegas in time for the Super Bowl on Sunday night. And that required a 13-and-a-half-hour private jet flight from Tokyo. And I heard one commentator going, Taylor Swift has stood up for a lot of the right causes, but this is just so hypocritical that she's flying back on her private jet for a football game, which the Super Bowl, yes, it is at its core a football game, but that's hardly what the whole idea is. Not to mention Travis Kelce, who she's been seeing playing in the Super Bowl, is a pretty big deal. But they actually criticize her for flying back because that's very damaging to the environment. One private jet flight is not damaging to the environment. Hundreds or thousands of them, okay, whatever. You've heard my feelings on climate change here. I've talked about it a lot. This planet's been here for 4 billion years, 4 billion years. And the planet has evolved and sustained different meteor strikes and cataclysmic events, and the planet evolves. The planet adjusts itself for its survival. And anybody who suggests to you that 120 years of industrialization in this world has changed the game and thrown the earth off of its regular pattern of highs, lows, changes, anomalies, it's just so ridiculous that people buy that rotten banana that it just makes me just completely incredulous to think about. But I've gotten off to a long dissertation on what I really want to talk about. And no matter how many subjects I'd like to wax poetic about today, we've got to talk about this whole Joe Biden situation. I don't think anyone who's been listening to the podcast has any illusion on my opinion of Joe Biden. I think he was a subpar senator. He was not a very intellectually gifted individual. He has never had a real job. His first job was on as a town council person in some podunk town in Delaware. And he's parlayed that to a career in the federal government, first in the House, then in the Senate for many, many years. Then, of course, vice president. And unbelievably, in 2020, he became the president of the United States. And anybody who would watch that election, Joe Biden using the excuse of COVID, basically sheltered and placed in his home in Delaware. People will refer to it as him being in the basement. Joe Biden made very few appearances. Joe Biden did not actively campaign. And Joe Biden somehow knocked out a president who was the incumbent, who had tremendous accomplishment in his 4 years. Of course, he was saddled with the very much unwanted burden of having to manage the COVID crisis in 2020, the election year. Boy, that was convenient that it arrived right then, wasn't it? But of course, that's what happened. And the final election count, despite the fact that Donald Trump got 12 million more votes than he did when he was elected in 2016, Joe Biden got 90 million votes, which was by far the most votes any presidential candidate. I'm sorry, 80 million. I was even exaggerating there, not on purpose. 80 million votes to beat Trump, and just by a razor thin edge in a lot of the swing states that all coincidentally suspended counting on election night and resumed several days later. And lo and behold, in all those states, Biden made up these huge deficits in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Michigan and Wisconsin, and won the presidency. Again, it's taboo now. You can't even suggest that perhaps there was a lot of anomalies and inconsistencies in this vote count in this election. The sad fact is that in a lot of these states, taking advantage of the current rules, including ballot harvesting, which is one of the most notorious devices that has been employed in many years here, a lot of states have managed to pass ballot harvesting legislation. And I think I've explained to you the day that I became aware of that, which was back in about 2016, did a broadcast and talked about how ballot harvesting is going to be a game changer, because that allows operatives in a campaign to go out allegedly and find people that typically would fit the pattern of their type of voters, but have not been people that have tended to ever vote or seldom vote, and go directly to their house, knock on their door, and get them to mark a ballot and put them in a big bin or box and take them and dump them at a dump spot or drop-off spot before the election. And one person could go out and collect 500, 600, 700, 2,000 ballots. And, you know, the problem with that is you don't know if any of those are legitimate. You don't know if they're just massively filled out using the names of these people. The verification process in 2020 was really subpar because of the COVID scare and the spacing and all of that stuff. Observers at the polling places were kept back hundreds of feet, so they really couldn't watch what was going on. And then on election night, it still appeared that Trump had the edge in these battleground states when counting was suspended. And out of nowhere, pallets of new ballots, which is the pallets of ballots, sounds like a very alliterative way to put it. But boxes and pallets started showing up at these election headquarters, and virtually every single one were for Joe Biden. And suddenly in Georgia and Pennsylvania, where Trump had huge leads, that lead evaporated within about 48 hours as they counted these ballots, which, looks like to me almost certainly were printed somewhere. And with no verification process, it was a veritable license to steal. So I'm not so much saying that the election was fraudulent. The Democrats brilliantly inserted the line, every ballot must be counted. But that means every legitimate ballot. And anybody who thinks that the voting totals in this past election, after about 120 million votes were cast in the 2016 election, when Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump, that number of approximately 120 million in this election went to over 150 million. So you're telling me that all of a sudden, in an era and a time when a lot of people were told to lay low and had gotten used to working at home and not commuting much and not being out and about, if you're telling me that in that situation, 35 million more people cast votes than the election before, I'm just going to tell you that's just an absurd figure that anybody who looks at it logically is going to be convinced that is just, not accurate. There's something wrong there. All of a sudden, you didn't get a lot more civic-minded people. Now, let me say this. I have made it very painstakingly clear on this show. I am not a Republican. I don't like a lot of the things that Donald Trump does style-wise. I think people to decide to vote for a guy who was clearly in severe decline, who they kept hidden, who they didn't really let campaign, who just was not on his game, lost his fastball, as the baseball term applied to it. But Joe Biden's fastball was subpar when he was in his prime. So this is a guy that was unspectacular, is riddled with scandal, which I was already aware of, and people that pay attention were already aware of, that his family, particularly his brother James and his son Hunter, had been globetrotting around the world, collecting millions of dollars to buy influence while Joe Biden was vice president. There are certainly a lot of proven instances where numerous shell companies have been set up and money was transferred to every member, all the way down to young grandchildren under 6 or 7 years old, having accounts established that all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of dollars showed up in. I mean, anybody with any common sense can see this is, the most rotten thing in Denmark, because this family has cashed in on Joe Biden's position, and it's been the driving force of his public service, which I love that. There's no such thing as public service anymore, folks, particularly in federal government. Public service is self-service. That's what it's all about. So it absolutely stunned me that the reaction following the release last Thursday night of the special prosecutor's report about Joe Biden and his handling of documents that were classified in his house in Delaware and his office at the University of Pennsylvania, and in a third location, in an office in Washington, was subpar and improper, and that he knowingly was handling these materials and with full knowledge that that was not proper. Classified documents is a fascinating subject when you consider there's 41 counts against Donald Trump in Miami at the behest of Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, one of two cases he's bringing against Trump, that he mishandled classified documents and compromised national security, et cetera, et cetera. And you heard in that report by Herr, Herr, the special prosecutor in the Biden matter, that his findings, almost 400 pages, example after example of having all of these documents dating back to when he was in the Senate in the 1970s, and they were not secured. They were not locked up. Famously, you've seen the photos, I'm sure, of these ratty boxes in his garage up against the back wall, like his Playboy collection. That's what it reminded me of. Some kid that used to go to these paper drives and find magazines in the midst and hide them in some shoddy looking boxes in the basement of the garage. But these are classified documents, many of them top secret, very sensitive. And the report, if you read it, and I'm not going to tell you that I've read all 400 pages. I've read major passages in the last couple of days, but there is no language in there whatsoever that he did not act properly. I mean, the finding is that Joe Biden knowingly had materials that he was not supposed to have. And in preparation with a ghostwriter, a guy who was going to write his memoir, there were actually notations on top of these classified documents written by Biden or this author who certainly didn't have security clearance. So these documents were being used to clarify that Joe Biden during the Obama years had some differing opinions that were ignored, and he was going to set the record straight by bringing all of these documents into play to prove his points on things. Because one of the contentions by the special prosecutor, of course, was Joe Biden is having severe mental decline, particularly his memory, which is, of course, I had lost my mother last February. It's been just about a year ago now. Her decline from Alzheimer's was extremely excruciating to watch, but it starts with short-term memory loss. And anybody who has eyes and ears have been witnessing this. And that's the first observation I have is the hoopla after this report where this guy said, yeah, he's guilty of all this, but he's really a sympathetic figure. He's an elderly guy whose mental capacity is severely diminished and his memory is failing. I don't think it would make sense to prosecute him based on those reasons because it's unlikely that a jury would convict him from the sympathetic standpoint. So that was his get out of jail free card. This guy isn't fit to stand trial, so we're not going to press charges. But you can't have that and have, well, wait a minute. If he's not fit to stand trial and his memory is failing and he's in major cognitive decline, how can this guy be the leader of the free world? How can this guy have his thumb on the nuclear button in the football, the briefcase they carry around with all the codes, what delusional thing can this guy possibly do? Anybody with a functioning brain knows this is a very dangerous situation. And the sad thing about it is, I don't think Joe Biden is the maniacal genius behind all this. The outrage that you're hearing from people about this report is not coming from your regular senators and representatives in the House in Washington, or even a lot of the Democrat operatives. It's coming from that cocoon of inner circle that has shielded Joe, kept him out of the limelight, made sure that he spent over 450 days now away from Washington at people's homes in the Caribbean or in Lake Tahoe, 2 and 3 week visits. Major supporters have given up their houses. He's got 2 houses in Delaware. He goes every single weekend, leaves about midday Friday, doesn't come back till midday or late Monday afternoon. So basically, he is in action Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday each week. But a lot of those weeks, he has nothing on his schedule. This is all intentional. They don't let him answer questions. They don't let him do very many events in person. And if it is, it's tightly scripted. I'll give Joe credit. His eyesight must be pretty good because he can still read pretty much off a teleprompter, except for when he mentions there'll be a comma and he'll say comma or colon, or he'll read he's not speaking, he's reading, and it's apparent from that. But the outrage and the reaction of, oh my God, our president is in cognitive decline and he's got a memory loss. If you watch him every day, if you have eyes and ears, we've been talking about this on this show since we came on the air, that this guy is clearly impaired. He is not all there. And it's absolutely preposterous that this guy is the president of the United States. And this inner circle, including his dear wife, Dr. Jill Biden, who's a doctor of education. Most teachers don't carry around the doctor label. But Dr. Jill Biden feels like she's earned that title, but that's another subject. But she's kind of the leader of the pack there. But all of these people in his cabinet, and of course the Obama contacts that are living 3 miles from the White House, that are still in charge of a lot of the people that surround Biden. This has been a carefully crafted situation. The shots are not being called by this guy. And anybody, it always makes me laugh when you hear a commentator saying, well, the Biden policy on this and Joe Biden's decision to leave the border wide open. Joe Biden's not making any decisions, folks. He's a puppet. He's a guy that was electable because of his supposedly middle ground kind of unifying figure, kindly, grandfatherly guy who was going to get everybody back on the same page. What a myth it's been from day one. And this inner circle has been pumping Joe up daily, obviously, not only with functional drugs so he can actually go out and pull off a 30-minute press conference. You can tell or not a press conference, an appearance that's scripted. You can tell it's wearing off at the end of those when he wanders around trying to shake hands with air and can't find the way to get off the stage. This has been a complete charade of his presidency, and these people have controlled him almost like some kind of human drone. They coordinate all of his movements. They give him a cheat sheet of who to call on if he does take a question or two. They give him directions about exactly where to walk out, where to stand, where to sit. He's got it in his hand. They've done close-ups of those. He is absolutely a push and pull guy that they control all of his movements. And the outrage and the shock that, Joe Biden is mentally incapacitated, has a bad memory. If you've been watching or listening, you already knew this. It's not a big revelation. Before last week, 75% of Americans, including 66% of Democrats, said Joe Biden's too old for a second term. Now, the latest poll released last night by ABC, not exactly a middle-of-the-road entity, ABC in a poll found now That number has ballooned to 76% of Americans say Joe Biden is not capable of serving a second term. But here's the thing that's really astounding, that after this finding in the special prosecutor's report, people are saying now he's not only not fit for a second term, he's not fit to continue now. This is a dangerous world, folks, and every decision and non-decision that unelected officials are making allegedly in Joe's behalf for you, these are people you didn't vote for. You don't know who is behind the scenes. You don't know who's really pulling the strings from the international community, from the financing world, all the big tech companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the military equipment complexes. All of these people are pouring all kinds of money in, and there's a variety of people that have control of what's going on, and it's scary as hell. We've got to fix it. And Donald Trump is a target of theirs. They stand up for democracy, and we have to protect democracy, because if Trump gets in, it's all over. He's going to be a dictator. He's going to have people executed. It's going to be a third world banana republic. But the people that are concerned about democracy are the same people that are trying to get him off the ballot in several states. The Supreme Court, with 3 extremely liberal justices, 2 of them completely chastised the people from Colorado that appeared there last week, defending their Supreme Court's decision to take Trump off the primary ballot. And if you've got far left-wing judges saying, you know, what do you base this on? I mean, they were just incredulous that Colorado had taken that action. Look for a 8-1 or even 9-0 Supreme Court decision on the legality and the illegality, actually, constitutionally, of taking a guy off the ballot. So between that and all of these, pardon my pun, trumped up charges against the former president, he's facing 4 different cases all over the country in hostile places that the likelihood of getting a fair trial is almost zero. They're trying everything possible to derail the Trump Express, because he's on his way to a second term, and they just think it's like the Antichrist coming. Because as much as they hate Donald Trump personally and the way he conducts himself, Donald Trump is the absolute agent that just derails everything they want to do. And all the progress, and that's interesting, progress for the progressive movement that's been made, Trump is going to throw it all in the dumpster. And this time, he's not going to go to Washington in a naive sense and depend on people in Washington for advice. This is going to be a game changer of going in there and cleaning out a lot of the coffers of people that have been riding that gravy train for years with these lifelong appointments that are untouchable because of the powerful government unions. Trump has already got a plan to literally drain the swamp this time, just not use that as a campaign promise. We're running short on time. Of course, Joe Biden comes out with the defiant press conference at night, which is a mistake, because it's pretty much established that Joe Biden never is seen after about 4 or 5 o'clock. He's like a vampire in reverse. When it gets dark, he can't function. He's not in the public light. This was about an 8:30 press conference Eastern time, and he came out defiant, and this is ridiculous. Talk about my mental decline and my memory. And then he talks about, as he stomps off the stage after yelling at several reporters, this is the Joe Biden that's behind the scenes that we hear, chastises staffers, cusses like a sailor, all of the image that Donald Trump is the one who is a blunt instrument and impossible to deal with. Joe Biden has had that reputation for people in the know for a long, long time. And now really not being aware of his surroundings, or, again, there's just clear signs that his short-term memory is going. There's been several incidents just in the past couple of days where he talked about sitting down with President Mitterrand of France at the last G7 conference back in the fall and saying, Mr. President, America is back. Mitterrand unfortunately passed away in 1996. So him telling the story of sitting down with Mitterrand, not too accurate. He did the same thing that a day later at an event in Las Vegas where he's out trying to raise funds, speaking to Helmut Kohl at that same conference. Helmut Kohl, the German chancellor, died in 2017. So he's talking to dead people about American foreign policy. Very interesting. And in the same conference that he came out to defiantly deny that his memory and his cognizant ability was failing, he said, it was me who called President Sisi in Mexico and told him to open the gates so the Palestinian people could flow out of there. Well, President Sisi is the president of Egypt. He's not the president of Mexico. And of course, the defenders say, well, that's, anybody can make a mistake. You don't make a mistake that's tens of thousands of miles and continents away. You don't say Mexico when you're talking about the Gaza Strip in the Middle East. That's not a mistake. That's just he can't find things in his memory, and he just blurts something out. And 99% of the time, it's something absolutely ridiculous. So President Sisi, who's the president of Egypt, not the president of Mexico, that would have been a neat trick for the president of Mexico, and to get the gate to allow people into Egypt. And I find the irony there hilarious because there's after all of the rhetoric from Biden, who's being told what to say, and all of these left wingers who insist that a border wall is not the answer, Biden taking credit for the Egyptian border wall to be opened up so some people can get out of the harm's way from the Palestinian Gaza Strip area. So apparently barriers do work if Joe has to get on the phone and call the president of Mexico to get the Egyptian wall open. This guy is hanging by a thread. He is the president of the United States. It's absolutely terrifying to think of the implications of that. And it's absolutely a slap in the face of everybody listening to this show, everybody who's an American, that we have unelected people behind the scenes pulling the strings, making the calls, and running this government, not the president of the United States, just like at the end of the Woodrow Wilson term back in the early part of the 20th century. Woodrow Wilson had a debilitating stroke with a year to go in his presidency. His wife, Edith, basically made him off limits, bedridden, and she signed all the documents and ran the country. Edith Wilson, at a time where women weren't even allowed to have a job in a lot of cases or vote, was the de facto president of the United States. So we have this precedent about the president before, and we're reliving it again. But now, in a nuclear age, in a very dangerous world with many implications, it's amazing that all of the uproar and hoopla has occurred because I'll say it again, if you have eyes and you have ears, you've been aware of this the entire time. That's all the time we have on this week's Need to Know. Join Tony Kurre and I later this week for Keefer and Kurre. We're going to talk about our impressions of the Super Bowl, not so much the game, which had an exciting finish, but with a lot of side notes and subplots, I guess you could say. It's going to be a fascinating show, and I promise you, even if you're a Swiftie, you don't want to miss it because we're going to talk about Taylor and Travis and have some fun with that. So tune in, and don't forget the starting lineup on Saturday morning. ABC 3340, we're going to be talking about the gambling bill in Alabama. Is Alabama finally going to get in the game with full-scale casino gaming, a lottery, sports betting, the whole 9 yards? That's going to be considered in the legislature. We're going to talk about it Saturday. Don't miss that show. Kip Keefer, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope we conveyed something that you need to know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.